Okay.
It starts out here by noting that a lot of the black artists in America have sort of become rather lazy in that they perform nothing but harmless love songs and dance music, whereas you guys have taken somewhat more of an aggressive stance in that you try to get across messages and also create...
Well, there are other artists that are doing that, but you're not hearing a lot about.
Well, that's actually part of the question there. Who do you consider a contemporary in that respect?
Well, I mean, there's Tracy Chapman, of course. You know, there are other bands that don't get the same kind of notoriety that we might, that aren't even signed. There's a band here in New York called Bluesland. With Mike Hill as the leader. He's doing his version of urban blues. I mean, who else? I mean, there's so many. It's very difficult to say who isn't Tackhead. There are lots of bands that are doing it.
But I mean, wouldn't your success spur a lot of record companies to look for that same combination of message, rock, black guys?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, there's still. I think the industry is still waiting to see whether this is just a fluke or whether we're actually serious about it. And that's why you don't see it. You haven't seen a flood of other rock bands with black members. That you will find bands with mixed members or something like that, but they have yet to see anything where everybody, the whole band, is black. I don't think the industry is still kind of pensive on that to see whether it's going to work or not.
Based on the response to Time's Up, which of course is still very limited at this time, what do you think? Have people eschewed the idea of you guys as a fluke?
I think this kind of proves to us, at least, that we have the ability to do more than just what you heard on Vivid. Just to show that we have a lot more in our repertoire of things that we do in terms of being a rock band.
Actually, there was another question hooked onto the first one. I guess the guy expected you to list names of various bands, and then it says here, why have so many of these bands appeared on the scene, signed or unsigned?
Well, I mean, they come out of a sense that there are things going on in the world, and they want to talk about what's going on in their world. I mean, it comes out of a reaction of the situations that they live in, as most music is. It's either a reflection of what they want or a fantasy.
How about in your own particular case? When did you find that music was a viable means of expressing that reaction?
Well, I don't know any. The things that I fantasize about, the things that I want, and the things. I mean, we talk about things that we'd like to see, and like to deal with, and like to have, but we deal with them on a realistic terms, and that's the only way that music becomes truthful, That's the only way that we want to speak truthfully about what it is we're going through, and music was a means by which we could do that.
How about in your own particular case? When did you first start playing music?
I've been singing ever since I've been a kid, since I was about 8 or 9 years old.
How about in a band?
It's about the same, We've all been, everyone, like Muzz and Will and myself, all had older brothers that were doing the same things, and they were like the local heroes, the neighborhood heroes in their particular expertise, whereas, Will's brother was a drummer of the block, and Muzzy's older brother was the bass player of the block, and my brother was like the singer of the neighborhood. So we had to live up to those expectations and what that was all about. And carry it on. Whereas Vernon was influenced by I believe it was a relative of his who had given him a guitar, and he just liked the way it sounded and decided to keep playing it.
Were you in a band before joining Living Color?
No, I wasn't, but everybody else was. They were gigging professionally.
Mm-hmm.
I was in basically like trying to start bands, and I was never I was always in like singing groups that never really got out of the like garage basement stage. Never really got a gig.
Well, what sort of style were you doing?
Like stylistic, Motown stuff.
So Living Color was a real departure from the styles you had actually been singing.
Actually, it was exactly what I wanted to do. More than that was a departure. It was exactly what I needed, what I've been always wanted to do all my life. Be in a band that said something, and that was, I heard black people saying what they had to say, and it was a rock band.
Were you always a fan of rock music?
Yes, I was. I mean, even from the earliest conception of rock music, a la doo-wop music, and stuff from the Platters and the Kleptones and the Penguins. The early reference to rock and roll, and progressed forward and backward at the same time. Whereas I wanted to find out where that came from, and also wanted to find out where it was going. So I found out about Fats Waller and Bessie Smith, and at the same time that I was listening to Chuck Berry and Fats Domino and Little Richard, and also listening to Hendrix and Cream and Foghat and Sly Stone, and then Parliament Funkadelic and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. How old are you right now?
25.
25. So if you started when you were 8 years old, so that would be 17 years ago in 73.
Right. Well, I mean, even younger than that. When I was singing in church and stuff like that. I wasn't gigging professionally or anything like that, but I was like singing when I was really young.
So you're actually a singer before you were a fan, huh?
Right. I was actually a singer because I would watch Ed Sullivan or something, and like think I could imitate. Like when the Jacksons were on Ed Sullivan, that's all I did for about a month.
So they were your earliest heroes then?
I mean, that's my earliest recollection of singing. But my earlier heroes were like Otis Redding and Sam Cooke and Jackie Wilson, actually.
I suppose it changes as you get older. At what point did you discover sort of I guess you would call a mentor, and who was it?
I didn't have any one particular person that was my mentor, but I listened to everything and anything I can get my hands on.
Are you still that way?
I'm sorry?
Are you still that way?
Yeah. I don't limit myself to that. Trying not to make not to limit my thinking to that, to one person.
You're credited with having appeared in Platoon. What was your role in that?
I played Francis,
which was
one of the privates. His notable thing was that he stabbed himself at the end of the film. Stabbed himself in the leg to get out.
Oh, I see. How did you get that role?
I was an actor before I got in this band. And working as an actor. And I auditioned for it, and I got the part.
Is that right? You were working out of L.A. then? And
New York.
Oh, did you appear in any other films?
I didn't.
That was your first and last major role?
Exactly.
You hadn't thought about continuing on as an actor?
I'd like to. I'd hope to, yes.
So it's still something that's sort of on the back burner?
Yeah, band takes priority.
Do you find yourself slipping into an actor's persona when on stage, or is it a completely different thing?
No, I mean it's a part of what I am. My training as an actor is to take as much as yourself on stage as possible, if that makes it a lot more real for you and the audience.
There's a question here about the music and how it got to be the way it is. Is it something that was just sort of spontaneously born out of playing sessions and doing live work and stuff, or was it something based more on a lot of research and analysis, something a lot more?
It was based out of on playing. When we got together, that's what it sounded like. When the four of us plugged in, walked up to a microphone, that's what it sounded like. Nothing calculating about it.
Mm-hmm. How about now?
It's the same way. That's what we do. We play. When we get together, we play.
Do you ever think of like the kind of feedback you've had from before? Does that account for any of the decision-making process?
I'm sorry?
When like putting together material, do you ever consider the sort of feedback you've had so far?
No, not at all. We play what feels good to us, basically. We don't look for any. We don't do it for anyone else when it's at the creative stage, but for ourselves, or depending on what it's about, and or the concerns that we have. If the music sounds good, then that's our number one criteria.
Do you ever worry about chart success?
Not really. No, I think what success to us is audience satisfaction, not record sales. If the people dig the music, whether they buy it or not, if they like it, they like it.
Judging from the way the records sound, it seems like you guys are more of a live band. Is it fair to say you guys are more of a live band?
Yeah, that's what we are.
Do you spend a lot of time have you spent a lot of time in the studios recording?
Not really. I mean, this last record took about 3 months to do. Or 1 month was recording about 19 songs. 1 month was overdubs, and 1 month was just mixing. So we kind of like did it really quickly. At the same time, we were in pre-production January. So and we finished the record in May. So once we got into getting the music together, and recording just took very quick.
We're led to believe that Vernon is more or less the leader of the outfit. Is that the same on stage as in the studio?
No, I mean, we are all basically individuals in this band. Vernon represents us in many cases because most people like to speak to Vernon. He is the leader.
Why do most people like to speak to Vernon?
Vernon has a longer track record than we. People don't know about him before they knew about us. Before they knew about the band, they knew about Vernon Reid. So they're a little more accustomed to talking to him.
But otherwise, it's a democracy on stage and off.
Very much so.
Reading again here from the list of questions, it says that though you guys sort of appeared on the scene like a bolt from the blue, in the final analysis, you're just sort of an unorthodox four-piece rock and roll band.
Right. I mean, we do what we do. We play hard. We play our music. This is the way it comes out. This is our voice. How we express ourselves. That's all it is. We're just a rock and roll band, like any other rock and roll band.
The gist of the question here was, do you ever feel any sort of limitations with regard to that the format? The
no, not at all. I mean, rock and roll for the most part is a music There's a musical art form that ranges, that goes from the blues to heavy metal to like orchestral music. I mean, its limits are endless. There's nothing that we cannot do within the medium of rock and roll, and especially the way we play rock and roll. It can be jazz, it can be anything, you know, but it's still rock and roll.
Mm-hmm. There's a question here on the new album. You'll have to forgive me for my ignorance. I haven't had a chance to hear it yet.
Uh-huh.
But the question reads that a lot of the material in Times Up deals with serious messages.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did you plan on making sort of a concept album in that respect, or did just a lot of message songs happen to come together?
Well, we compiled about 15 pieces of music that express us as we are now. Our likes, our dislikes, the things that we see, and the things that we'd like to see. And if that's a concept, then that's what it is. But for the most part, it's just us expressing ourselves, playing the way we do at this point in time.
You talk about you guys discussing what you'd like to see happen. I mean, do you see music as a means of affecting change then?
We see anything as a means of affecting change. What affects change most is an individual, is one's ability to make a change within themselves and kind of making a change in the world around them. If music is a motivator of that, then I guess the answer would be yes.
Mm-hmm. Do you think people have been affected in that way by your music so far?
I would like to hope so. There's only one way to find out, is by asking them.
Uh-huh. I mean, but people must write to you and stuff.
Yeah, when we get letters and stuff, we hear about how things have changed in their life since they've heard Vivid or whatever, and how they see things slightly differently because of it.
Kind of
it makes me very happy to know that what we're saying makes a difference in this world, and how we're making a positive change in this world. By our actions.
Pardon me?
By our actions, we're making a positive change.
Mm-hmm. By your actions being you're setting an example, or because
or setting up a way that people can think for themselves.
Kind of an abstract question, but what do you think your contribution to the overall scene has been?
Just another kick-ass rock and roll band.
So not much different from the kick-ass rock and roll bands that have appeared thus far.
Yeah, I mean, if we made a difference in that, we have made people see things that they hadn't seen before, or heard things in a different way.
Do you think you've improved things at all for blacks in America?
I think that only people that can change things for blacks in America are blacks in America. I don't think we're going to change things. I mean, we're just one band. Only people, there has to be a change made for themselves. You know, I can't force anybody to do anything. But if they want to change something, then that's a different story.
Mm-hmm. Where do you come from personally?
I'm from Brooklyn.
Uh huh. Did you come from a predominantly black part of Brooklyn?
Mm-hmm. Actually, there's a big black pot where I come from in central Brooklyn. There is a big black, Hispanic, Asian, and European Jewish community as well in my neighborhood.
So it was kind of a melting pot then.
Pretty much so, yeah.
But were very solid lines drawn, like between various races and nationalities?
Not particularly, no.
So you've always been exposed to people of all kinds, then, huh?
Living in New York, you can't help but have that happen.
But then again, you have a lot of parts of New York that are, predominantly black.
Yeah, there are lots of parts of New York that are predominantly white as well.
Uh-huh.
But if you live in New York City, you cannot help but deal with other people.
Uh-huh. So I guess having come from New York, that's just sort of had an inherent effect on your attitude towards life, and therefore the type of messages you try to get across in your music.
Right.
There's a question here that deals with a couple of rap acts as of late here. Public Enemy's Fear of a Black Planet, and Boogie Down Productions' Edutainment.
Right.
Listening to the guy who wrote the questions here, he notes that listening to these, there seems to be sort of a dialogue established between the performer and the audience.
Right.
Is that something you envy? Do you think those guys are achieving something that you haven't been able to achieve so far?
No, not at all. I think we all are doing it.
Uh-huh.
Not only us, but bands like us, Public Enemy, Boogie Down Productions, Tracy Chapman, U2. That's the whole appeal of a band, is that they reach an audience and that they talk to an audience. We reach people just as much as any other band reaches people.
Mm-hmm. That's what it all boils down to, being able to communicate with the audience,
Exactly.
Giving them something they can sort of feel from the heart.
Mm-hmm. But that's something that they can understand in a language or in a medium that speaks clearly to them.
Uh-huh. The acts you just mentioned are all sort of recent, or at least have only come onto the scene, say, as far back as 10 years ago.
Right.
Like U2. Do you think that acts like that have a long lifespan? Do they last a long time?
I think bands that talk about something other than the immediate and think ahead do. I mean, those are how many bands do you remember that didn't say much about anything that was relevant? I mean, do you remember anything that a band like I don't know trying to think of a band that is no longer around today.
Mm-hmm.
But that kind of situation where there's not that where they didn't have much to say, or they didn't say much of anything, and they went by the wayside because of people who were disinterested in them, because they weren't speaking to them. They're evidently not speaking in a language that was clear to them.
Mm-hmm. But you think that your audience has no trouble understanding your language?
But we would like to hope so.
Uh-huh.
We won't know until it happens, until we see it. Until we reach out, we go out to an audience and talk to them.
It seems like one of the factions that spends a lot of time, observing you and writing about you and making notes on you are the people who are sort of concerned about the so-called purity of black music. They talk about black artists selling out, or having been sort of ill-affected by their surroundings, and therefore losing the purity. How do you respond to that criticism?
That most people who know music know that black music encompasses a whole lot of things, from rock to reggae, and what we're doing and what we're playing is in keeping with the traditions of black music. Those who do not know that are ignorant to the fact.
Mm-hmm. So you feel that what you're doing is right along the lines of those traditions, then?
Very much so, yes.
I think one thing that throws people off is that there's really no other band to compare you guys with stylistically, at least on the surface.
Right. I mean, that's because we are our own band. We are four individuals who play the way we play. And a band like Fishbone, for example, plays the way they play because of where they come from and what they've been set up to do. A band like, Bad Brains comes across differently. Or a band like 247 Spies is a completely different animal than what we are, and there's no comparison because there's a different criteria for the way we play and the way they play.
This is a question on your audience. The guy here notes that there are probably a lot of people in your audience who just see you guys as sort of, he might just sort of get his frustration out of the system when he watches you, but otherwise, you don't leave a lasting impression on him. You're sort of.
If we didn't leave a lasting impression on them, why would they come back?
Mm-hmm. So
if that's the case, the proof in the pudding is whether they come back or not. And if they don't, if all they're doing is getting rid of their frustrations and that's it, and they don't want to deal with it ever again, then that's okay. But we have people who come back time and time again.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. I have to read these questions in Japanese, so sorry, it takes me a little bit of time sometimes to come up with the English. There are a lot of artists who are not very concerned about what goes on in society and are more concerned about just creating music that sounds good. Like, for example, a good example would be like the Beach Boys. What do you think artists like that?
They have their place. They have. Sometimes you feel like dealing with that. Sometimes you don't. It really depends.
Mm-hmm.
It's your own. That's your own decision when buying or listening to music.
Why do you think that you guys would be more concerned with society, whereas, say, a Brian Wilson wouldn't?
I think Brian Wilson is very much concerned with society. He writes lots of songs that are concerned, that have a lot to do with that. But those are not the songs that you most you don't recognize that about him. But there are other things. There are other things that he has done.
I think the basic question would be why are you guys more concerned with society, whereas a lot of artists seem to be rather
society.
Pardon me?
We want to talk about. We want to speak about the truth and deal with the truth. And if we want to talk about having a good time, we will. We haven't decided to do that just yet.
The interviewer here notes he calls your music black rebel music, and he says a lot of your contemporaries would sing about Africa, or at least add something about Africa to the lyrics or something, whereas you guys, it seems to be conspicuously absent from your lyrics. How's that?
It doesn't need to be said, because if it needs to be said, we'll say it. At this present time, we don't feel like we don't feel like saying it. We talk about Africa all the time. We don't use the word Africa, but we don't have to say Africa in order for me to be talking about Africa. I don't have to be talking about. I don't have to say black man in order to be talking about a black man. I don't want to insult. Wouldn't insult your intelligence by saying that.
Is it really relevant anymore to talk about Africa?
I think you should be aware as much of your heritage and where you've come from, much as anyone else would. And always have it have it in your mind and always know what it's about.
No, the reason I asked that is, I mean, my mother was born in Germany, but I don't talk about Germany, and nobody points the finger at me and says you never talk about Germany. Is it?
I understand, but I mean, for people who have been denied that in their lives, have denied their history and their culture, it's very important that is said.
Mm-hmm. So you think you've been denied your history and your culture?
You don't?
I just want to get your opinions.
Yes, I think I would agree, yes.
Mm-hmm. Like, can you elaborate on that?
Well, I mean, it's kind of obvious if you take a look at American history. The importance and the roles of black people and their history starts on a slave ship. It doesn't start after. It doesn't start before then. And there's a rich and long history that has happened in their culture long before the existence of America, that is completely denied of black people.
Denied meaning that, like, it's not written about in the textbooks.
Exactly.
Have you made an effort at acquainting yourself with that history?
Very much so.
Just by reading on your own?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Because it's not being handed.
Okay. Let's see, back to the list here. There's only a couple more questions to go, by the way.
Okay, no problem.
The track Elvis is Dead.
Mm-hmm.
This would appear to be sort of an indictment of mistaken perceptions and myths, various myths in rock and roll.
Right. Again, whereas where the history books are talking about rock and roll, and the role of black people in rock and roll is denied of them.
Well, again, could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Well, I mean, to call Elvis the king of rock and roll is a misnomer. If Elvis was the king of rock and roll, that being he invented or he was the quintessential rock and roll musician, then where was Little Richard?
Mm-hmm.
Where is Chuck Berry? Where's Fats Domino? Where are these people that at the same time that Elvis was around, and before Elvis was around, was doing the same thing, the same way, if not better.
So you mean, like, stylistically, credit hasn't been given where credit's due?
Exactly. And we're not saying that Elvis was a bad person.
Mm-hmm.
Elvis is. We would ask that you respect the dead.
Meaning the dead other than Elvis.
Well, no, respect Elvis as being dead. And respect his death, and not to make a mockery of his death by saying you saw him at the shopping mall or at the convenience store.
There are two things that work in that song. That sort of one, you're pointing the finger at myth makers, and the other is that you're pointing the finger at those who make a mockery of Elvis's death.
Exactly.
Okay. Let's see. Here's a rather general question. Over the last 2 or 3 years, what one event have you been the most pleased with, and what one event have you been the most angry about? What has made you the happiest? Let's put it that way.
What's made me the happiest?
Yeah, the one event that's made you the happiest.
I don't think there's any one event, but I think that the advent of people thinking on their own and not adhering to conformity, something I'm very happy about. And the opposite is what I'm not happy about.
But, I mean, the thing is, that's been going on for like thousands of years now.
Yeah, but I mean, in the past 10 years, you haven't seen much of that.
You haven't seen as much as people, like, blindly following, you mean? More people.
You've been seeing people blindly follow for the past 10 years, and there's a change coming along now.
Well, what do you think is accounting for this change?
I think that seeing that you cannot rely on anyone but yourself to make a change in this world, and that people are not going to make the change for you.
And why is this coming about now? What are the forces that are leading to this?
I don't know. It's very difficult to say what exactly. There's not one thing that can pinpoint it. I think it's a cyclical sort of thing. And at this point in time, it's the time to change.
One last question here. The 60s, this is the observation of the interviewer, by the way. The rock and roll movement in the 60s seemed to talk a lot about change and stuff, but, no revolution ever really occurred. No big changes occurred. How about, it's over 20 years later, you guys are singing about revolution. Do you have any real cause for singing about revolution, or any reason to be optimistic about that?
Well, it looks as though, and the only way that a lasting change is going to come about is through revolution. Bloody or bloodless, there has to be a drastic change. Something drastic has to happen in order for a lasting change to come about. And if that's the case, then it needs to be said by someone. Or a group of people, at least.
What are the changes that should occur?
Well, just individualism and talking about and dealing with and making a change within yourself as an individual. In order for change to occur, it has to come inward and work its way outward, not the other way around.
But what you're talking about is something more philosophically based, whereas revolution tends to be politically motivated.
Well, revolution doesn't start revolution starts inward, not outward. It comes from an idea. It's an ideology that starts revolution, not an action. All actions start with a thought.
But you talk about there being this sort of rampant blind faith. But what do you think is the most noticeable manifestation of it? Where do you see this?
Reaganomics.
Reaganomics?
Mm-hmm.
Meaning people just sort of listen to his policies and let him get away with this stuff, and now it's sort of left us with a legacy of terror.
Exactly.
Do you think that owes to people not thinking for themselves, just following the leader?
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
But I mean, the king is dead. Things should be changing right now.
Well, let's hope it is. The only way we're going to, until I see that, I'll decide whether it's right for me or not.
Do you guys make your political views vocal? Do you actually back certain candidates?
Well, yeah, we do. I mean, we back people that we feel are that see some sort of vision, or have envisioned some sort of change, or are willing to make some sort of change. I haven't seen anyone yet, but I'm waiting.
Oh, so you guys have never really openly endorsed candidates?
We haven't seen anyone that hasn't done that just yet.
But you're willing to if you do find somebody like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, Coy. Well, sorry to drag you over the coals a couple times there, but hey, it's all in the name of music journalism.
Yeah, really.
Thanks a lot for the interview, and wish you guys the best of luck.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.